Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Biblio Files. This is the program on AADL TV where we take a few minutes each time to talk about one book subject. My name is Lucy, and as usual, I'm here with Christopher and Amanda. And today we each picked a book from the Lambda Literary Awards list. And these are also known as the Lammies. They are awarded yearly by the Lambda Literary Group to recognize the crucial role LGBTQ writers play in shaping the world. These awards, which are given across 24 categories, celebrate the very best in LGBTQ literature, and they were instituted in 1989. So from 1989 to 2021, and 24 categories of winners. So we all had a lot to choose from, which was fun. Christopher, what did you pick?
Well, I have a lot of notes on this title, so I hope I can get to all of them. I chose the 2020 science fiction fantasy horror winner called Everyone on the Moon is Essential Personnel by Julian Jarboe. The stories feel really modern. There is social media, there are trips to the moon, there are cyborg implants, there's coastal flooding, there are class struggles. And I should say that this is a collection of short stories right off the bat. But there is also a lot of Catholicism woven in, and there's a fairy realm, and there's transsexuality. So there is a lot going on. I want to say that Jarboe does use the word transsexual in a very purposeful way. That is their preferred term for many of the characters. And this is Jarboe weaves these worlds that are really just like ours, but they're slightly different, or they may be taking place, 10 or 20 years in the future. They're really fascinating to read. These stories do read very quickly, despite the fact that there's a certain loneliness or depression in some of them. It kind of felt like watching the movie Never Let Me Go in a lot of ways. I also sometimes felt like I was reading a Philip Marlowe novel, because there are a lot of really great turns of phrase. One of them I wrote down was "Night unfolds like a cootie catcher." And so there are so many of these, and I didn't want to quote too many of them because I don't want you to get the wrong idea of the writing in the book, but there are just some great, great phrases in here. Let's see. I also wanted to mention my favorite story in this book is called As Tender Feet of Cretan Girls. Let me start over. My favorite story is As Tender Feet of Cretan Girls Danced Around an Altar of Love. This was fascinating because it's all about the Minoan snake goddesses and their reincarnation. And I just loved how the information about the characters unfolds as you keep reading. It was just beautiful. So that is Everyone on the Moon is Essential Personnel by Julian Jarboe. Also, I just wanted to mention, fans of Kelly Link would love this collection. Amanda?
Well, thank you, Christopher. That sounds like a good read, like for many titles people already know. So pretty cool. The book I chose to talk about today is King and the Dragonflies by Kaysen Callender, and hopefully I said their name right. King and the Dragonflies, it won in the LGBTQ children's/middle grade category, and it was published in 2020. I love this book. It was on my reading list at the end of the year last year, or 2 years ago, when I finally got around to reading it. The book centers on a young boy named King. He lives in the bayou of Louisiana. He is 13, and his older brother died 3 months ago. And he is currently living with his mom and dad, and things are not the same. Things are just completely still in their house. It's only been 3 months since his brother passed. It's very quiet, and there was a lot of crying, and there was discussion about, are we allowed to cry? King is struggling really hard with losing his brother. They used to share a bed together. And so each night when he goes to bed, or before his brother passed away, he would write down things his brother said in his sleep. So now that his brother is gone, his connection is still reading those notes. And the things his brother said in his sleep are just really, it adds that kind of dreamy, or no pun intended, but it kind of adds that dreamy element to the book. But King is 13, and he's got a pack of friends at school, and they're 13. There's like who likes who. But there's one friendship in particular that's important because King was good friends with this boy, and then now they're not friends anymore. The boy, Sandy, is very open with his sexuality. Well, not very open, but he's accepted the fact that he's gay, and he tells his good friends. Whereas King's unsure, and King's older brother tells him, don't be friends with him because he's gay. So King is battling. He's like, well, wait a minute. If people are racist against us and other Black people, how is that different? How is it okay to not like somebody or talk to them because they're gay? How is that different than not talking to somebody or liking somebody because they're Black? So King has a lot of things going on in his head, dealing with these young friendships. Does he like a girl? Does he like a boy? He's dealing with his own sexuality. There's the extreme grief of dealing with his brother's death. And then the eventual discussions he has with his parents about his sexuality, some of his friendships, and of course, dealing with the father-son relationship. And eventually King has a lot of self-realization, as much as you can have as a 13-year-old who's going through so much. But I love the book. It's a fast read. The King is a really he's a really good character. I like being in his world and hearing how he perceived things. And I really love the addition of viewing his relationship with his brother through some of his memories, and him reading some of the things that his brother had said while he was sleeping. There's the dragonflies comes into play because King wants to believe that his brother became a dragonfly, and it's not magical realism at all. It's just one of his ways he's coping with the grief is believing that his brother is still out there and is now this dragonfly. And I feel like a lot of people do that. They kind of try to envision their missed person, their lost person still out there in the world in some form. So this is King and the Dragonflies by Kaysen Callender. Lucy, you read that book, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I loved that book. It was really great. So
what did you
I'm glad you run it. So I picked the 2021 winner for bisexual nonfiction. And this is a book of essays by Samantha Irby called Wow, No Thank You. And Samantha Irby writes for some online publications. She's written some episodes of TV for different shows. And she has a blog called Bitches Gotta Eat. And she is very, very funny. And this book of essays she just draws on like raw, hilarious particulars of her life. She talks a lot. There's a lot of body humor. She's very self-deprecating. She's very honest. And in this book, she's sort of starting where she's moved to Kalamazoo to be with her wife. And she since before that has always lived in Chicago. And she inherits 2 children. She has a really funny chapter about being a stepmother in sort of the most removed way you could be, but it's just really, she's just very funny about it. She's not mean. She doesn't shy away from topics that are often considered taboo, especially for women to talk about. She freely discusses sexuality. She talks about romance and relationships, a lot of romance and relationships with men and women. And she talks about the horrors of getting your period. She has a whole chapter about that called Hysterical. So she's just very real and just wholly relatable because she just writes about like aging and, but mostly she writes about like how being a human being is hard and having a body is hard. And so I think that, that creates a lifeline to like many readers because everyone goes through that in some way. She talks about her mental health very honestly. She can be overwhelmed by both the minutia and life's larger issues. Like many of us, it's sort of the perfect book for the pandemic because Irby doesn't really like outside. She doesn't really like people. She doesn't really like wearing, out like real people clothes. So she's like, I'm comfortable inside. And it's sort of like reading this conversation with someone who could be your friend. She just, as I said before, she tackles issues that you don't normally read about. I think the bi representation in here is really good. It's very strong because she writes so openly about relationships with both men and women. And she has chapters specific to like her body negativity and Hollywood summer. And she is talking specifically about like the lack of representation of fat people, or like the really, dismal lack of representation of fat people. She has some of my favorite chapters were these lists she did. One was called Lesbian Deathbed, where she's just like, sure, sex is good, but, and then she lists these really funny things like, have you ever tried, this amazing sushi or something, that's not a really one, but, and then she has this one called Hello 911. And it's just all these like little lists of hello 911 question mark, like hello 911, I have to merge. Hello 911, which line is longest in the grocery store, but she'll go on. And it's just really like, I was laughing out loud so much reading this book, which right now is just such a nice thing. And I just appreciated how open she was about everything. And in light of like this being awarded a Lambda Award, I mean, she was asked in an interview, like, is it hard to slip into talking about, bisexuality? And she said, it's never been a big deal for me because I've always been so open that once I got married to my wife, it just kind of flowed naturally. And she doesn't want to speak for other people's experience in that regard, but her lack of holding back is just really appreciated. She's written a couple other books of essays that are also very funny. So I would recommend picking up anything that Samantha Irby has written. She's very smart and very funny. And I enjoyed Wow, No Thank You very, very much. So that is my pick. Does anyone have any other thoughts about their books or other Lambda Award winners?
Well, Lucy, I will say that I have the book on my to be read list, but I'm currently waiting for the audiobook because I want to listen to it.
Yeah, it would be great to listen to. I think she just, you miss her when you're finished with it. So, it's a good read. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode. As usual, we always like to know what you're reading. So if you have read any Lambda Award winners or just the finalists, we would love to hear from you about that. So thanks again.